I think there's quite a lot of people to blame, but the most imminent, or the most recent one is clearly the Chancellor with the budget that came out last week, which was incredibly sort of fiscally expansive and involves an enormous amount of new borrowing. And I think some of the policies in there are reasonably rational. Fixing the supply side, generating investment in this country is a worthy ambition, but the timing just couldn't have been worse. You know, the only thing that's going to get this economy out of jail now is sharply falling inflation coming in pretty quick order, which is quite a big thing to count on given where we are at the moment in the cycle. So I think the timing and the size of it was unnecessary and ill-judged, and has put the Bank of England in a sort of tricky position. And I mean, I think what they've done at the long end of the curve was more technical than kind of people losing confidence in the UK, as others have suggested. I think it really was this pension issue. That's something else to be at blame. I think the regulations and rules around that, but the Bank of England and any other central bank needs to be that lender of last resort in a dysfunctioning market. And I feel like they've come in and done the right thing at the long end. It hasn't changed the requirement for them to be hawkish and tightening monetary policy. If anything, we all wish they'd been doing it more rapidly. I think the Bank of England is the central bank that's been most behind the curve out of the developed markets in the last few years. So the blame is shared equitably around a number of players, sadly. But I think probably on the Chancellor's door, the majority of it.
Well, it's interesting you say the Bank of England has been behind the curve, because they were perceived to be in front of the other major central banks on the QT announcement, which also seemed to be a problem for the market given the flood of gilt issuance or gilts back into the market that was anticipated, both from the Bank of England selling back its portfolio, but also from fresh issuance from the DMO. So let me ask you then, are we at a point, do you think, where the path of rate hikes is changing? Because we saw the US markets bounce off the back of what the BOE did, and we also saw the Treasury yields decline. So it does make you wonder now if the markets are beginning to think that I will need to adjust my investment approach, because maybe the terminal rate will ultimately be lower than previously anticipated, or at least it'll take a lot longer to get there than we thought before.
Yeah, I think there are two things that are sort of slowly seeping through the macroeconomic picture that point to that being possible. The first is a lot of components of inflation, especially on the goods and energy side of the equation, are falling quite rapidly. And that bodes well for a potential lower inflation rate in the coming months. And the second one is the fear is increasing of a really quite hard recession coming in the next 12 to 18 months, say. I mean, I don't know about the timing, but so the combination of potentially lower inflation and potentially worse economic growth both point you towards the idea that at least the rate hikes should stall from here. But really, we're talking about the US there, because they've been, I think, setting rates relatively appropriate and going pretty hard in their rate rising cycle. I still feel like the UK's got some catch up to do. You know, base rates are 100 basis points behind the US base rates. And so I do think there's a bit of catch up to do here first. And also, you know, there's an element that must be going into the thinking around trying to support the pound, given it's nearly down at parity with the dollar.